So, as Susan mentioned, I am the Chief Investigative Reporter for 12 News in Phoenix, which is the NBC affiliate. I've worked there for almost 6 years. My career spans 17 years in broadcasting. However, way back when, I wanted to be a federal prosecutor, and I earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration with an emphasis on prosecutorial function and criminal law. So I have a bunch of prosecutors in my family and some defense attorneys as well. So I wanted to nail the bad guy. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to put the bad people away who did the bad things in society. I had a change of heart after working in the San Diego County District Attorney's Office, and I decided that I could use my talent and skills, and I went back to journalism school at the University of Nevada, Reno, the Donald W. Reynolds School of Journalism, and I completed the program there. And that has enabled me over the last 17 years to be an investigative journalist. And it is a wonderful, wonderful career. Wonderful. I have wonderful things to say about it. I don't regret not going to law school, although sometimes I wish I had to have that as well. But today is a very tough act to follow, Mr. Crone. I would be disingenuous if I said I could follow in his footsteps. I have no idea what it's like to be in prison. I do know, and what I can tell you today, I know how it feels for those that are wrongly accused. I also know how it feels. Ray mentioned that the prosecutor, this is how you climb the career ladder. That's what you said about the prosecutor, winning a conviction in his case. I'm feeling that same sort of heat. I have been lately coined as an opportunistic journalist that has exploited 2-3 fire captains with the Phoenix Fire Department for my own personal gain. So more on that later. But I began on this storyline involving the Phoenix Fire Department. It had the highly touted arson unit, and they boasted that they had the highest arson clearance rates in the country. And I sought out to debunk that. And I was very successful. My investigation began in 2012. And just to put it into perspective, this didn't just come to me out of nowhere, out of a thin blue air. I did a story in July of 2012, and some of you may be familiar with this. There was a defendant named Michael Marin, and he was a bankrupt millionaire who was on trial for arson. The Phoenix Fire Department concluded he burned his mansion down because he couldn't afford to pay for it anymore, and he needed the money. He stands trial, several weeks trial, and he is convicted. The jury delivers the verdict, and he puts something in his mouth like this. He ended up swallowing cyanide, and he died in 7 minutes in that courtroom. The most stunning thing I have ever witnessed in a courtroom. It was completely shocking. I'm seeing a man collapse, foaming at the mouth, convulsing. It was devastating. Nobody knew at the time what was going on. And thank goodness that no one gave mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, because he ingested enough cyanide to wipe out the entire courtroom. He was hell-bent. He was not going to prison, and no one was going to tell him how he was going to live. So I ended up doing an 8-minute story investigation on his life and death with the conviction. And we did it like Dateline does it, but we only got 8 minutes. We didn't get 45 minutes to do it. And shortly afterwards, one of my favorite stories, tragic, one of my favorite stories. But in the story, I was allowed to go to the Phoenix Fire Department, and I interviewed the lead investigator in the case of Michael Marin. And he was so quick to boast about this dog, this secret weapon, Sadie the arson dog, the canine accelerant detection dog. And Sadie, in the Michael Marin case, she hit on everything in that house. And they were sure that was an arson, and it may have been. The jury agreed it was. It was. But that really piqued my interest, and I thought, gosh, a dog. You have a conviction and a dead man based on a dog. And I thought that was really interesting, a really interesting concept. But what really piqued my curiosity was how quick they were to brag about this dog. A secret weapon, a dog, huh? You know? As an investigative journalist, I was like, that's really interesting. Not long after, I got a bombshell of an email, and I had to sit down. It said, "You've seen nothing yet." My girlfriend was charged with arson in 2009, and they used that dog in her case. And the county attorney finally dismissed the case against her in the interests of justice. And I thought, oh boy, this sounds too good to be true. This sounds too good to be true. And he says to me, "I have a video I want you to see." And I said, oh, I'd love to see it. You know, we're in television, and I need video. I need video. And so he comes into the station, and I had my manager with me, and he shows us this video of Captain Fred Andes and Captain Sam Richardson on the arson unit. They're going through the burned-out house of Barbara Sloan, the woman who was wrongfully accused of arson. He's leading the canine dog, because he's the handler, through the house, and she's not hitting on anything. This dog is not hitting on anything. As a matter of fact, she looks like she's irritated. She's walking in water and charred debris, and, you know, I'm sure it hurt her little paws. And all of a sudden in the video, he tells the dog, "Seek, seek, seek. Come on, at least put your nose down and fake it for me, okay?" That's what he says in the video, and you're going to see that. That's what he says in the video. My jaw was on the floor. Seriously, my jaw was on the floor. I could not believe my eyes. However, my manager, he's like, "Well, I don't know if that was in the proper context, and, you know, we'll take a look at it and we'll consider it." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's a smoking gun right there. We'll take a look at it?" And I couldn't even believe it. So I had to fight to do this storyline. I have done 24 investigative reports on the Phoenix Fire Department's arson squad since early 2013, but I began working on it late 2012. And it has really consumed my life as well, but in a very, very positive way. So once I picked my jaw up off the floor, I contacted the attorneys in the case, the civil attorneys in the case, and I got a boatload of information. I spent countless hours going through depositions in the civil case, the criminal case. I looked at everything. I went down to court records, and I researched, and I studied and studied and studied. And I was told by the Phoenix Fire Department, "Oh, sure, we'll get you everything that you need." Well, they didn't count on me having that video already. So I sent them a public records request, and I was very clear, and I said, I have a video of Captain Andes with the dog, and please be sure to give me that video. So they knew right then and there that I wasn't messing around. They made many attempts to stifle information from me in violation of the Arizona Public Records Law. For example, they had fire crews who put out a fire, another one that was deemed arson by these arson investigators in another case. The fire crew who put the fire out there were standing in the alleged crime scene posing for pictures as if they were posing for a calendar. And they intentionally omitted those from me. They didn't want me to have that, because our firefighters, remember, they are heroes. And granted, yes, they are. They do a great public service, and we have high regard for them. But when you're standing in the alleged crime scene and someone has gone to jail for 18 months accused of arson and endangerment, and you're standing there posing for pictures, and they didn't want me to have that because they knew I'm in the media and I would expose that. So they didn't give those to me. So I knew that they had them because a private investigator working on the case had obtained them for the defense. And so they finally coughed them up to me. So my point is a lot of attempts to stifle, a lot of attempts to silence me, a lot of attempts to make this go away, and a lot of attempts to seem as if I got it wrong, incredibly wrong. So that's a little of the backstory on this. I want to show you a report that was done in January of 2014. It took me an entire year to get the Phoenix Fire Chief, Bob Kahn, on camera. I tried, I put in request after request, and it was met with silence and denial. And so at one point, we went to a public appearance he was making, and he's at the podium, and there's a bunch of firefighters and other personnel and city leaders there, and we couldn't put our microphone up on the podium because there was a great deal of distance. And so I thought, I'll get him afterwards, but I didn't get him afterwards because after the mayor spoke, the mayor said, "Oh, the chief has to leave early. He has to attend something." And he turned around and he walked away. I couldn't get him then. There was no way I could get him. So that told me that I was on the right track. When I finally landed that interview with Chief Kahn, he retired early a day and a half after this story aired. So let me play it.
News investigative reporter Wendy Halloran looked into the Phoenix Fire Department's arson squad. Her findings have nationally recognized arson experts shaking their heads and questioning the squad's claims that it closes more cases than any arson unit in the country. Wendy uncovered victims falsely accused and arrested for arson.
And those arrests were based in large partly on a specially trained dog used to detect fire accelerants. Wendy's report triggered an FBI investigation and a review by City Hall. Conspicuously silent through all of this was Fire Chief Bob Kahn. That is, until now. Wendy joins us now with more. Wendy.
Well, Mark and Lynn Sue, for years, Bob Kahn was the public face of the Phoenix Fire Department. Starting on a fire truck in 1982, he rose through the ranks to become chief in 2006. Now, on the City of Phoenix website, Chief Kahn says his focus for the future of the fire department is on evaluating resources, looking for the best possible way to deliver service. When we sat down and spoke earlier this month, our conversation centered on the arson squad and details he apparently wasn't aware of. You didn't know anything about this?
No.
What Chief Kahn didn't know much about was the department's arson-sniffing dog, a secret weapon, who, according to his handler, never gets it wrong.
Show me. Show me better. Should be a lot more than that, though, huh, Sammy?
You think, wouldn't you?
See? See? No, you gotta put your nose down. At least fake it for me, okay?
Is that appropriate?
No, it's embarrassing. That he used that phrase is embarrassing, I think, for all of us. It is for myself.
Captain Fred Andes is the dog's handler. Last year, he was awarded Arson Investigator of the Year from the Phoenix Fire Department. In the video you just saw, Barbara Sloan, the woman whose house burned down, ended up being arrested and charged with arson. After 2 years and $300,000 of her money, her case was dismissed by the Maricopa County Attorney in the interests of justice.
I lost almost everything because of it.
Prosecutors reviewing Sloan's case concluded lead investigator Captain Sam Richardson, who shot the video of Captain Andes and the dog, was an inexperienced fire investigator. Richardson would admit he arrested Sloan solely because she was the homeowner. He had no evidence tying her to the fire.
Barbara, she came to you and told you nothing but lies.
He didn't want to look at the truth.
Is that acceptable?
I would say, well, I haven't received a complaint other than that document on Sam. I would agree that he was inexperienced going into this case.
Richardson's colleagues, independent arson investigators, and nationally renowned fire experts said Richardson's conclusions were all speculative. The fire started in the fuse box in the car parked in the garage. There was no arson.
That's news to me.
I believe she's far superior to what the labs can do.
Both Andes and Richardson have testified before grand juries and in civil depositions to the veracity of the arson dog's abilities.
Even though 2 crime labs came back and said there were no accelerants present, you still believe your dog. Is that right?
That's right.
And you're aware that the lab was not able to conclude that there were accelerants in those areas?
That doesn't mean anything to me.
Okay, why not?
Because I've seen that dog prove the lab wrong to the lab itself.
Yet your Captain Richardson tells the attorneys in that particular case that the dog proved the lab wrong to the lab itself. How does a dog prove the lab wrong?
I think that would be in conflict with 921.
921 is the guidebook, the Bible for fire investigators. It is published by the National Fire Protection Association. It says any alerts from a dog must be confirmed by a lab before being considered valid. That has not been the standard practice with the Phoenix Arson Squad.
The dog was way better than I had. And we proved it wrong. I believe the dog 100% of the time.
I don't know that he has experience with canines. I don't have an answer for that.
The Canine Accelerant Detection Association says canine handlers should never testify in criminal or civil court to the presence of an ignitable liquid without having received confirmation through laboratory analysis.
But from what I know about arson investigation, if a dog gets a hit, it needs to be confirmed by a lab report.
My investigations found 4 cases where people were falsely accused of arson. One man spent 15 months in jail awaiting trial because the charges were finally dropped. Chief Kahn didn't know why the cases were dismissed, but Jack Ballantyne did. He is the director of the arson unit and a state fire marshal. Ballantyne answers to Kahn.
Your director of your fire investigations unit, Jack Ballantyne, knew all about this. He knew all about this. Why didn't he bring it to your attention then?
I'm not sure.
Is that a problem for you?
Yeah, well, I'll have to ask some questions, absolutely.
Now, the arson investigators were told they could no longer advance their opinion the dog is superior to the crime lab. These investigators are peace officers certified through Arizona Peace Officers Standards and Training, known as AZ Post. That board asked Chief Kahn to launch an internal affairs investigation on Jack Ballantyne, Captain Fred Andes, and Captain Sam Richardson, and report back to them any violations of their rules. Now, as for the clearance rates, Phoenix no longer touts they're the highest in the nation. Director Ballantyne aired combining juvenile statistics with adults and cases that were dismissed. Today, the Phoenix Fire Department said it would have no comment about this. Director Ballantyne was told that when he shares numbers, they must coincide with national standards. Wendy Halloran, 12 News.
So there you have it. The inability or refusal, if you will, for peace officers, and these are specialty peace officers, they have arresting authority, not following the scientific methods of arson investigation, which according to the National Fire Protection Association, which, as you saw, writes the guidebook for fire investigators to follow. Yet they were claiming that they were following it. If they were following it, then the dog isn't the end-all, be-all. The dog is not always right. In fact, I want to show you a PowerPoint presentation right there. Okay, which lab is better? Okay, as I mentioned, the NFPA, which writes the guidebook for fire and explosion investigators to follow, says that any canine accelerant detection dog is to be utilized as an accessory. It's an accessory to help the law enforcement, to help the fire investigators in their investigation. It is not the end-all, be-all. It is not superior to the crime lab. I apologize, I can't see what I have on here. And also the Canine Accelerant Detection Association, known as CADA, right up there, does not recommend testifying to the veracity of a canine accelerant detection dog in civil and criminal courts without the presence of laboratory confirmation. As you saw in that story, those arson investigators repeatedly testified to the Maricopa County grand jury that the dog was better than the lab. In Barbara Sloan's case, the woman you saw there, in fact, Captain Richardson was the lead investigator, and he testified, and I have the grand jury transcripts, when asked about what the dog hit on, and he says the dog hit on I believe it was 3 or 4 areas, but that the lab results were not back, and he said that didn't matter anyway because the dog is 1,000 times better than any machine. That's what he told the grand jurors. And in the end, the grand jurors, they want to believe a law enforcement official. They're essentially Teflon. We have to believe our law enforcement officers because they take an oath to protect and to serve, and they have credibility. So he tells the grand jury that the dog is 1,000 times better than a machine in a lab, and that grand jury ultimately handed up a criminal indictment against Barbara Sloan, based in part on that testimony. There were other things that he said that she did. For example, he maintained that she poured gasoline on the outlets, she barricaded the door, there were several things, she pulled the gas line, all sorts of things. In the end, he never bothered to investigate the garage, which defense experts and even 2 experts from his own department, the Phoenix Fire Department, determined that the principal fire, if not the only source of the fire, was in that Toyota Corolla in the garage, which was subject to a recall in the fuse box, and that's how the fire spread throughout the house. So this cost her $300,000 to defend herself before the case against her was dismissed. And we're talking about a successful woman who worked in the insurance industry, and she was destroyed. She's still destroyed over this. To this day, this department thinks she's an arsonist. They still maintain that she's an arsonist, and some have even gone on social media saying she's an arsonist. So it's pretty incredulous. Another thing that Captain Sam Richardson did in the other case, the gentleman you saw in the first video, Carl Caples, he was accused of arson also in 2009, right around the same time of the Sloan fire. Again, the lead investigator was Captain Sam Richardson, and they brought the dog in on that one as well. As you saw in the first story, there was an audio clip of Richardson, and he said, "Who lit this fire?" I want to talk to you briefly about going in with expectation bias. I'm not a scientist, I'm an investigative journalist, but I have studied, and expectation bias is when you go in to a scene with a preconceived notion that it's an arson, and you don't follow the scientific methods of arson investigation to rule out otherwise. And that's what, the defense attorneys in the Caples case concluded, that he was biased. He went in with a preconceived notion. And it started to become a pattern in all of these cases. And as a matter of fact, Jack Ballantyne, who was at the time the supervisor of the arson unit, nominated Captain Sam Richardson for the department's Medal of Merit based on two of these cases, the Barbara Sloan case and the Carl Caples case. And they factored those cases into their arson clearance rates that they turn over to the FBI, the Unified Crime Reporting, and that further helped with their success and their numbers and allowed them to boast that they had the highest clearance rates in the country as well. And both cases were dismissed by the Maricopa County in the interests of justice. Now, when it comes to the dog, the canine, peer-reviewed research shows that while a dog's nose is sensitive, has a good olfactory system, it is not the same as a crime lab. And so the NFPA recommends that the dog is used as an accessory, the dog is not the end-all be-all, and that the crime lab should rule out. These arson investigators dismissed that. It didn't matter to them that the crime lab in both cases concluded there was no presence of accelerants or could not establish the presence of accelerants. And when you think about it, you've got all this testimony going before the grand jury. So the victim is the grand jury, and then you have people who are arrested for arson fires, which defense experts conclude that they weren't arson, they weren't intentionally set, but these arson investigators refuse to believe that to this day. One other thing about the dog, and this came out much later. During the course of my reporting, much to the ire of the city council in Phoenix, it ended up where the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board wanted a criminal investigation conducted against these arson investigators. And the Arizona Department of Public Safety spent many months conducting a criminal investigation, and they interviewed Captain Andes, Captain Sam Richardson, and Jack Ballantyne, their supervisor. And the men were placed on paid administrative leave during this. And during Andy's interview with the criminal investigator, Detective Carlos Contreras, he admitted in his criminal interview that he didn't keep records on this dog. And you're supposed to keep records on the dog to show their reliability, and it's of critical importance that you do that. And he's asked why, and he finally admits because it would show she was only right 50 to 60%. Did condemn their behavior, he questioned their integrity, he placed them on the Brady list, which is a database for peace officers with marred credibility, officers who've lied under oath, engaged in other misconduct, where you can challenge their credibility on the witness stand. Now, in Maricopa County, he renamed it to the Rule 15 Disclosure Database. It's not a list you want to be on. It really is not. And they were permanently removed from fire investigations by their department. And the arson dog was retired. So poor Sadie. You know, it's not her fault. It's not her fault. But you have to also take into consideration that a dog, she was a food reward dog. So she got fed when she hit. That was her job. That's how she ate. And so you have to also factor that in as well. Let me move this over one more here. Okay, this is what I call the smoking gun. Now, I was very fortunate to get this as a journalist. This is the case disposition worksheet from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, which is a confidential, highly confidential document. You rarely, if ever, see something like this because it's attorney-client communication. It's the attorneys the prosecutors staffing this case and writing their notes and whatnot. And this was obtained in the civil case in Barbara Sloan with a subpoena. They were only able to get this with a subpoena, and it contains an utter breakdown in the Sloan case. It says that Captain Richardson created a great deal of reasonable doubt when he admitted that he arrested Barbara Sloan solely because she was the homeowner. He had no evidence tying her to the fire. He thought that her boyfriend did it. He agreed that his conclusions were speculative. He never bothered to check the garage. It was a damning document. And it also, in the prosecutor's notes, outlined how the prosecutor failed to turn over exculpatory evidence to Barbara Sloan that could have proved her innocence. So, as a journalist, this is incredible. This is incredible. So I had that on my side to show. And it also concludes with defense experts, nationally renowned experts, and then 2 members of the Phoenix Fire Department, their own colleagues, concluded that fire started in the car parked in the garage and was the only principal fire. So their case completely unraveled because of this, and this was dismissed in the interests of justice. So, you know, if you become investigative journalists, this is something you want to get, and you need to seek out defense attorneys, civil attorneys, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to get things like this. Granted, they're very, very difficult to get, but this really helped seal my case and my reporting on this. Let's see. Oh, that's the end. Okay. So as I mentioned, the arson investigators were placed on paid administrative leave, permanently removed from the arson unit, transferred over into other divisions of the fire department. And if they are ever to return, although they say they were permanently removed, the county attorney is going to require that they be completely retrained. Let me tell you this. This is incredulous. So the county attorney believes that the Phoenix Fire Department should take affirmative steps to address the deficiencies identified in the DPS criminal investigation, and respectfully requests that the fire department develop a retraining program for these employees who were involved. And remember, they're peace officers. They've already gone through the detective training. They've already gone through all of that. So the county attorney wants them to relearn certification and records keeping, court testimony, search and seizure, probable cause, crime scene integrity, evidence collection, canine certification, keeping records, because Captain Andes failed to keep records because those records would have proved his dogs, not all that. So anyhow, so they've been permanently removed, and I've done a great deal of work on this, and to this day, as I mentioned, they still say that these fires were arson and that I got it wrong, and I was on a witch hunt. So I'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to show you another video of why this should never be allowed to happen, ever. To not follow the scientific methods of arson investigation should never, ever be allowed to happen, People become falsely accused, people go to jail, and some people go to prison. And the Arizona Justice Project is reviewing. Captain Andes and Captain Richardson had 400 cases, and they're taking a look at those cases to see if an innocent person is sitting in prison based upon these discredited arson investigators' work. And I'm very thrilled about that. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. As a journalist, I have to stay middle of the road, but I have seen what this does to people who are wrongly accused. So let me show you why it's so important. We have a case in Maricopa County right now where a man is accused of setting his pregnant girlfriend on fire, and he is facing the death penalty. Captain Andes and Captain Richardson worked that case. Let me show you why what I have brought forward is important to this case now.
Only on 12 News, the Public Defender's Office wants the county attorney to turn over evidence involving 2 members of the Phoenix arson squad. Those 2 men are accused of lying under oath in an arson case, and now they could be part of a separate case that involves the death penalty. Those arson investigators have been the subject of a series of exclusive reports by Wendy Halloran, and Wendy joins us now with this new twist. Wendy?
Well, then, Sue, defense attorneys for DeJuan Darius Robinson want jurors to know DPS has recommended criminal charges against 2 of the arson investigators involved in their client's case. Robinson is accused of killing his girlfriend, setting her on fire. The defense is worried if given the opportunity, one of the arson investigators will try to persuade jurors to facts that are not substantiated.
In the summer of 2012, a pregnant Shaniqua Hall was found bound, gagged, and burned to death in her bedroom. Captains Fred Andes and Sam Richardson were assigned the case. Andes used his arson dog Sadie to sniff for accelerants on Robinson's clothing. The dog hit on several items. The crime lab tested the same evidence but could not reach the same conclusion. In several documented instances, Captain Andes has maintained the dog's ability to detect accelerants is always better than a machine. In fact, in a recent interview with DPS, he made the claim again.
The machinery that is used reads in parts per million. They believe dogs can do parts per billion.
His belief is not shared by the National Fire Protection Association, which wrote the book arson investigators are supposed to follow.
I trained that dog, and she's just amazing. It has nothing to do with what I've taught her. It's just the way they are. Their noses are incredible.
Andy's report states the canine has proven to be much more accurate than any currently available laboratory equipment. The Public Defender's Office believes if Andes is allowed to testify, jurors could conclude accelerants were present on Robinson's clothes, and thus he set his girlfriend on fire. In its motion, the Public Defender's Office is trying to compel prosecutors to disclose information about the credibility of Andes, as well as Captain Sam Richardson and their supervisor, Jack Ballantyne.
He was comfortable that his dog was reliable. He was not comfortable with the person that was doing the testing.
Now, a spokesman for the Maricopa County Attorney says it plans to file a response to this motion and says the office complies with all disclosure requirements and court orders. The Phoenix Fire Department says it cannot comment. All 3 men are on paid administrative leave while the department conducts an internal investigation, which is expected to take 4 months. Wendy Halloran, 12 News.
So we have a death penalty case. And we have discredited arson investigators. And we have a man who could be sentenced to death if found guilty. So what do you do? What do you do with something like this? So it'll be interesting. This has not gone to trial yet, but it should be interesting. And that's the damage that can be caused by not following the scientific methods of arson investigation. The last thing I want to talk about, and this really pertains to the students, being an investigative journalist, being threatened comes with the territory. Oh, yes, please. Comes with the territory. Although I take it very, very seriously, when I have the power to jeopardize someone's livelihood, to affect them like I did with these arson investigators. They were relegated to firemen after they were permanently removed, and their peace officer certification is currently inactive. They have no law enforcement authority whatsoever right now, and they're still fighting it. They're still fighting it. They're hanging on the fact that the county attorney declined to prosecute them. And also, the Phoenix Fire Department conducted an administrative investigation that found that they essentially had no malicious intent. So they think that they're cleared, but not as far as I'm concerned. So I continue my investigation, and on August 20th, I come under attack by a very powerful fire union in Phoenix. I am condemned, and you're going to receive the statement that they issued publicly that I have engaged in a character assassination of these men, and that I am an opportunistic journalist doing this for my own personal gain. When in fact said that I nominated myself for the Alfred I. DuPont Award, which I won for this series of investigative reports that have taken almost 3 years to put together. A boatload of work. And in case you don't know, the Alfred I. DuPont is the equivalent, the broadcast equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize. It is awarded by Columbia University, which also awards the Pulitzer Prize to print journalists. I never nominated myself. I would never do something like that. My work stands on its face, and that's why I won, because people were harmed, people were wronged, and I vindicated them. And now I'm under attack. I have been the target of serious abuse by this union, by the firemen, by their family, and by their friends. Recently, they have hijacked my social media accounts for 12 News, posting horrible things about me, calling me all sorts of names. It's been very, very difficult. They have even posted that I better hope I don't have a fire, but they're not going to respond. They have posted wishing ill will against me, physical harm against me, hoping that I crawl under a rock and die for doing my job. I did my job, and I did it well, and I exposed malfeasance and wrongdoing, and I am under attack because of it. As you see in the statement, they failed to mention, I'll wait till she finishes passing it out. They failed to mention that the men were permanently removed from fire investigations. They don't say anything about that. They also failed to mention that their peace officer certification is inactive, and the board recently voted to resolve the matter in the future. They're not off the hook. And wait until they're, have to undergo depositions in this DeWandarius Robinson case, in the death penalty case. And I'm sure that the defense is going to have a heyday. This has really caught the attention of the Maricopa County Public Defender's Office as well, because the men have been placed on the Brady list, if you will, as well. But they don't mention that in the statement that you have. They don't mention they're permanently removed, and they don't mention that they're on the Brady list. And I'm the bad guy, as you can see there. So those are the perils of being an investigative journalist. I'm used to exposing things that people want to keep hidden from public scrutiny, but I refuse to allow discredited arson investigators to continue to harm innocent people. Whether they think those people are arsonists or not, that's their opinion, but the science proved otherwise. So Phoenix Fire Department allowed them to run amok, and it seems that the reporting has worked, and they've been permanently removed, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I never nominated myself for this award, which is very prestigious, and I'm very grateful. But it did another good thing. By winning it, it put this on a national stage. There's a lot of dialogue about canines used in arson investigations, especially on threads and discussion threads, and it really, really has touched a nerve. So I hope this helps you, and I hope for the aspiring journalist that it inspires you to dig deep, and don't let threats stop you. Don't let people stop you. When you know in your heart and your mind, and you have the evidence to prove that these people are innocent and have been railroaded, go for it. Do the best you can. The biggest thing for me was with Barbara Sloan and Carl Caples. I have helped vindicate them, and they are enormously grateful. And for me, that is the reward of why I do what I do.
We're a little bit behind, but that's all right. We'll catch up at lunchtime. Are there any questions for Wendy? She'll also, you're staying around for the day, right? So there'll be plenty of time to talk to her, to interview her. Yes.
I have two questions. One, I'm not super familiar with legal speak, so what does it mean the case was dismissed in the interest of justice?
Well, the county attorney has this way of, in the interest of justice, and he even categorized it as that they caused harm to the Phoenix Fire Department's reputation. So the interest of justice means that there's evidence that proves that this wasn't an arson, and the interest of justice and doing the right thing by the defendant is what that means. They've never given us a clear definition of that, but
So is Barbara Sloan, is she then proven innocent by this dismissal?
well, it never went to trial. So, however, they didn't dismiss it with prejudice. Now, if they had dismissed it with prejudice, they could never retry her, take it to trial ever again. She also sued her insurance company as well for bad faith in the claim that she had filed against them, and that brought in even more to it. But that was overturned as well. So there's, I don't think that she'll ever be, prosecuted for arson in this fire because it was determined that it wasn't an arson. So, but as for what the interest of justice, I believe that to be just the judicial system and fairness.
I would like to point out that we have two former prosecutors, now attorneys working for the Pima County Attorney's Conviction Integrity Unit. Maybe on your panel you can explain what that means later today. We'd be happy.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Did you ever face accusation of defamation while you were doing these investigative reports?
No, not until this statement here. No, nothing, because I had all of the evidence to back everything up in the 23 plus reports that we'd done. And I even sought out the firemen. Captain Richardson, as you saw in the first story called Barbara Sloan a Liar, he wasn't supposed to talk to me. But I went to his house and went on his property, and he wanted to tell his side of the story. He wasn't going to allow his employer to silence him, and that was to his detriment. No, never, not at all. Everything that I do is legalized by our legal counsel, every word, every frame of video, everything. We are very buttoned up.
Okay, the other questions, is it possible to save some of the questions for, we can add you to a panel, because I want to make sure we get to Dr. Bohan next. Can you remember your questions? I don't want to cut questions off, but I want to make sure we get to the next topic as soon as possible. Write your questions down, especially the journalists. I'll add you to the panel so that they can. Thank you so much.
Thank you.